Major Guevara,
Major Guevara,
Ernesto Che Guevara.
You've heard the name. You've seen the face. On posters, on t-shirts, on the walls of revolutions he never witnessed. But how did this man, a doctor from Argentina, become a symbol for both hope and horror? Before the gun, before the beard, there was just Ernesto, a medical student with asthma and a motorcycle. In 1951, he set off across South America on a road trip that would forever change his life. Poverty, hunger, injustice. It wasn't in books anymore. It was in faces, hands, silence. It was in the eyes of those suffering, those left behind. He met countless people whose lives were shaped by poverty, oppression, and disease. He wasn't just an observer anymore. He became an active witness. This trip would not just change his perspective, it would transform him. What he saw made him question everything he had been taught. It wasn't just that the poor were suffering, it was the system itself that created their pain. This was a turning point. His initial calling as a doctor was now not just about healing bodies, but fighting the very system that allowed the pain to persist. Ernesto had a vision of something more, but he had no idea that the road would lead him to a revolution. In 1953, after witnessing the desperate poverty in Guatemala under the US-backed dictatorship of Carlos Castillo Armas, Che's perspective on the world shifted. He saw how American imperialism suffocated the people of Latin America. This wasn't just political. It was personal. It was human. It was a fight for survival. In Mexico, he met Fidel Castro, a man with a similar vision. But where Che saw action, Fidel saw a movement. Together, they talked about empire, revolution, Cuba, a land ripe for change. Che didn't hesitate. It wasn't a decision based on ideology. It was an instinct, a call to action. This wasn't about grand theories anymore. This was about changing the reality on the ground. They sailed on a broken boat called Granma, a rickety vessel that nearly sank before they even landed on Cuban shores. They stumbled into history. But Che wasn't just the medic now. He became El Comandante, a leader, a fighter, a man who would leave his own humanity behind.
In the Sierra Maestra Mountains, Che was tasked with training peasants in guerrilla warfare. But he demanded more than obedience. He demanded complete transformation. He wasn't just building an army, he was shaping a movement that would be violent, uncompromising, and absolute. Deserters were shot. Fear was instilled, not just to survive, but to die for a cause. Che enforced discipline in a way that would make his critics question his humanity. But in his eyes, he was creating the backbone of a revolution that could not afford to falter. In 1959, they won. Batista fled. Cuba was theirs, for better or worse. Che was now at the center of a radical transformation. He oversaw agrarian reform, public health initiatives, and literacy campaigns. But he also implemented brutal executions. To some, he was a hero, a revolutionary messiah. To others, he was a fanatic in uniform, a zealot who believed that the ends justified the means, no matter the cost. Che believed in the purity of his mission, to rid the world of imperialism and oppression, but his means were brutal. His drive to enact change was so intense that it often crushed those caught in the crossfire. But Che was never meant to stay in one place. The revolution was just a beginning for him. Che's vision extended beyond Cuba. He wasn't content to simply reform one country. He wanted to ignite a global revolution. So, he vanished. He left Cuba to export the revolution, first to the Congo, where his attempt to foster a revolution ended in failure, but not defeat. For Che, failure was simply a stepping stone, not a reason to retreat. Next, he went to Bolivia, a land of mountains, isolation, and harsh conditions. He believed Bolivia was the perfect place for a revolution, a place where the oppressed would rise. But Che miscalculated. He was betrayed. His movement was isolated. His enemies weren't just soldiers. They were time, silence, betrayal. The revolution didn't take root. In fact, Che's legacy in Bolivia would not be forged in success, but in failure. Captured, starving, surrounded, Che wrote his last letter to his children, to history. No grand speeches, no martyr complex, just a tired man preparing to disappear. He had failed, not because his ideas were wrong, but because time had outpaced him. The world was shifting, and Che couldn't keep up. He was executed in a schoolhouse in La Higuera, Bolivia. They posed with his body like a trophy. A man who had fought so fiercely for the people was now nothing more than a corpse for their propaganda. They thought they had killed the man, but they created something far more dangerous, a myth. Che's death turned him into a symbol of defiance, a figure who transcended time and geography. Now, his face is everywhere, on mugs, on phone cases, on billboards selling rebellion to people with nothing to rebel against. The same system he fought now prints him in high res and sells him for $19.99. The capitalist society Che loathed has commodified his very image. The revolution Che dreamed of has become a business. The irony isn't lost on anyone who understands his true mission. Was he a liberator or a killer? A romantic or a radical? A man or an icon? Che Guevara's life cannot be reduced to a simple narrative. He was both saint and sinner, hero and villain, idealist and pragmatist. But in a world that demands easy answers, he remains an enigma, a revolutionary caught between myth and reality. His legacy is one of contradictions, a man who fought for the oppressed, but often oppressed those around him in the name of that fight. He was a man of love, but his revolution was soaked in blood. He was an idealist, but his ideals created a brutal reality. Maybe that's the power of a myth. You don't have to agree with it, you just have to remember it. And by remembering him, you're forced to confront what revolution really means, what it costs, what it sacrifices, and what it leaves behind. The true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. Ernesto Che Guevara.